We're really excited to have Somerset County Clerk Steve Peter as our special guest tonight, and he's going to dispel all myths about vote by mail and separate fact from fiction. But on a lighter note, Jon, how are you doing? I know your wife is pregnant. How are things going?
Yeah, thank you. Things are going really well. Kelly is pregnant. She's due actually in like 3 weeks, so we're getting down to crunch time. But everyone's doing great. The kids are getting ready to go back to school on the virtual hybrid model, I suppose. And for whatever it's going to be, we're looking forward to making the best it's going to be. So, Sophia, how are things on your end with your kids?
How exciting! How exciting! Well, my older kids are their colleges are open, Cornell and Middlebury, but all their classes are online. So as of now, they're going to stay home, and I'm kind of happy to have the extra help. So for
Nice
those
to have
of
them
you,
around too, I'm sure.
yes, absolutely. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sophia Chatta, and I'm running for Bernards Township Committee. I'm running because I'd like to see local government that is more transparent, inclusive, and innovative. Our property taxes are increasing while our home values are decreasing. And I want to ensure that Bernards Township remains the premier place where people want to live, work, shop, and conduct business. Jon is my running mate, and he is a very skilled attorney. Jon?
Thank you, Sophia. I am also running for Bernards Township Committee alongside Sophia Chatta. It's a true honor to be in this position. And I'm running for Bernards Township Committee mainly because I want to make sure Bernards Township is the best place it can be for many, many years to come. As mentioned earlier, I've got a pregnant wife. I've got 2 kids in the school district going into 3rd and 5th grade. And my heels are dug in. I'm not going anywhere for a long time. So I want to do everything in my power to make sure that Bernards Township is the best place it can be. So as Sophia mentioned, we are very, very excited to have Steve Peter as our guest tonight. He's here to talk all things vote by mail. And with that, we'd like to welcome Steve.
All right.
Hi, Steve.
Good evening.
Thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here. So happy to be here, answer questions about the election that's coming up. Of course, the governor signed the executive order on Friday afternoon that changed the general election to a mainly vote by mail election, very similar to what we had in the primary. So I hope we can utilize the lessons we learned in the primary to make sure that this election goes as smoothly as possible.
So Steve, I hope you're getting some rest. You have been very busy before the primary and since the primary. How did things, have you recovered, or how are you doing?
Rest? What is this word of which you speak? I don't know that one. I keep hearing words like that in vacation. I have no idea what that is. It's been really interesting because the primary was delayed. We literally had no downtime between finishing the certification of the primary and getting going with the general. In fact, just this morning, we had a recount for a council race in Manville. So that was the last little bit that we had from the primary, and we're already going gangbusters on the general. And in fact, I can show you right here, this is what the general ballot looks like, more or less. There are a few things that are going to change on here, but this is the first approximation that we have of it. So you can see the local races there in the first 2 columns and toward the bottom. And then on the back, we've got the public questions and the school board. So we're getting ready to have everything certified to us from the state, hopefully by the end of this month, so by the 31st of August. And then we'll go to print shortly after that. I've got to get ready to send out about 240,000 ballots to all the voters of Somerset County.
So, Steve, I know the ballots are supposed to come out October 5th, but when can voters here in Bernards Township expect to see ballots in their mailbox?
So the 5th is the absolute deadline by which we have to have everything out. And we're hoping to have things out a week before that. So hopefully by the 5th, they should have ballots in their mailbox.
So,
And
Steve, is that for both
yeah,
absentee as well as the universal vote by mail now, so to speak? So, if people registered for an absentee ballot, for example, if they lived in another state or living overseas, that October 5th deadline is the same?
so for the overseas voters, federal law defines that we have to send them out earlier because we have to allow for the transit time. So those will go out like the 19th of September, I believe is the date.
Excellent.
So
Great.
So we've heard a lot since the governor announced that New Jersey was going primarily vote by mail. A lot of in the news concerns that somehow vote by mail may make an election more susceptible to fraud. You know, we certainly don't believe that to be the case, but how do you respond to that question when people ask you of that?
well, it's interesting because if you look back the past couple of years, most of the discussion has been around cybersecurity and the vulnerability of machines to hacking by foreign interests. And the experts for a number of years have been advocating having a verified paper trail in all election systems. And voting all on paper is the ultimate verified paper trail. And like I say, we had a recount this morning. We had all the ballots there. You could examine them. You could see whether there were extraneous markings on there. You could see the intent of the voter as you looked at those ballots. You can't quite do that if a machine malfunctions, if they pressed a button and it didn't record that vote that they wanted, although I don't believe that has ever been the case. And in terms of fraud, it's interesting because we hear a lot of discussion about what happened in Paterson in the primary election. But when you think about it, the reason why we know what happened in Paterson is because the system caught the fraud. It detected the fraud. So we've got a number of items in place to make sure that fraudulent votes do not get counted and that only legitimate ballots cast by the voters are counted and that every single one of those is counted. So I'm very sure that the system works.
Steve, there's been a lot of confusion regarding what is the best way to return a vote by mail ballot, especially with the post office and all the chaos that it seems to be in right now. What would you recommend to voters in terms of the best way to return their ballot?
Yeah, so just like in the primary, we're going to have ballot drop boxes throughout the county. We have 5 in place from the primary. The state is going to provide us with an additional 8 drop boxes. But in Bernards, you're lucky because there's one right there at Borough Hall, and you can go into the complex and deposit your ballot there. Personally, that's what I would do, and I'm lucky because I've got a drop box right out in front of my own building here. But I would utilize that first. If you're early enough in the process, you can mail it via the US mail. Or something different this time from the primary is you can return your voted VBM ballot to the polling place. So what you'll do is you'll bring your ballot, have everything sealed, and have the certificate filled out. You will then sign the voter roll just as if you were going to be voting on the machine. And then you will take that ballot and deposit it into a ballot box, just like back in the old days.
Interesting. So just to follow up on that, Steve, I know that with the primary, not all the polling locations were open. In Bernards Township, I think we only had 2 polling locations that were open. To the extent there are voters that either want to vote provisional, which I understand they can do as well in person on election day,
That's correct.
or if they want to return their sealed vote by mail ballots to the polling place, how will they know what polling place they're assigned to and what polling places are open?
Right. So about 2 weeks before the election, I will send out a postcard that indicates where the polling place is, where everything's going to be available. I will also list all of the Dropbox locations on that postcard. Like I say, we're going to get 8 additional boxes. We don't know exactly where those are going to be located, but by the time that postcard goes out, I'll have all of those.
So the voters should look for 2 things. They should look for their I'm sorry, Sophia. They should look for their vote by mail ballots. There will be no samples. The vote by mail ballot is your ballot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then that ballot will not actually indicate a polling location where your sample ballot would, but rather about 2 weeks before the election, they'll receive an additional piece of mail from you indicating what polling places are open within the township as well as where the drop boxes are. Is that correct?
Absolutely correct.
So we have a question from Eric P. As an AFT member, my union ballot was mailed 2 weeks ago. It has not yet arrived. I like vote by mail, but I'm worried about Trump and DeJoy's attempts to make vote by mail unreliable. Your response, Steve?
So, I mean, I share the concerns about the post office. And what I will say is, by law, I'm required to mail out these ballots using the Postal Service. If for some reason you do not receive a ballot by sometime in early October, give my office a call. You can come in, and I'm looking to set up some space in a commercial location where you can come in and we can issue you the vote by mail ballot. And as of right now, you can still come in and get that. And we can hand it to you directly. You can vote it on the spot and return it to the drop box here in the county complex.
And I saw that we had your contact information there on the bottom of the screen. For our viewers, it is, if you need to contact Steve, it's 908-231-7013, and his email is countyclerk@co.somerset.nj.us.
Thank you very much, Steve. So one of the other things that I've seen around is that there's an option of returning your completed ballot also to. You still there, Steve?
Do you hear me? Because I have gone.
Yes,
everything has gone dark again on this end. Assuming you can hear me, and I see Linda Ness's question there. There is an online tracking system where you can tell if the ballot has been received. We won't know, we can't tell you that it's been counted until well after the election, just because of the nature of having all of the, everything done on paper. So I see that John says that you can hear me. What I'm gonna try to do right now is briefly go offline and reconnect, because that's worked in the past. So hopefully I will see you in 1 moment.
Excellent. Gotta love the technical difficulties, right?
Yeah, technical difficulties. It makes it a little exciting. So
it does. So I will tell you that the primary election this past July was the first time I'd ever voted by mail, and it was a pretty smooth procedure. I used the ballot drop box right in Bernards Township, and it was totally fine. Steve, are you there?
I'm here.
Excellent.
Great.
We got Steve again.
And I guarantee you that our systems will run more smoothly than a broadcast.
Steve, what if someone throws out their ballot or makes a mistake? What should they do?
That happens all the time. What they should do is give us a call. We can issue what's called a duplicate ballot. And for those concerned about fraud, don't worry. The more ballots we issue, only one is ever counted. We do keep very close track of everything. So just give us a call at the number that I indicated, and we can issue you a new ballot.
Excellent. We have a question from Steve Glickman, who asks, will ballots received early by the county be counted before Election Day, or will counting begin on Election Day?
So under current law, we cannot begin counting early. There is a bill in the hopper right now, and it's on fast track, that will allow the Board of Elections, that reminds me, I will explain something in just a second, but will allow the Board of Elections to open up all the ballots and have them ready for tabulation beginning 12:01 on Election Day. But that reminds me, let me step back a second here. The election is split in New Jersey between two different offices. There's the county clerk's office, and I'm responsible for receiving petitions for offices that are either countywide or larger than one municipality, which functionally is school district elections. I am responsible for creating the ballot, for actually designing it, for doing this part. I'm responsible for mailing out the vote by mail ballots, and I'm responsible for counting the machine votes. The Board of Elections, which is a separate office, is responsible for the actual operations on election day. They secure the polling places, they run the machines. They are also responsible for receiving and ultimately counting the vote by mail and provisional ballots.
But you guys certify the results, even though they do the counting?
Exactly. I certify the results. Yeah, and the commissioners and I, as a group, certify everything, and we're what's called the Board of Canvassers.
So we have another question from Jane Conklin. How do we know a ballot won't get delayed or lost in the mail?
I don't know that there's any really way to know that. What I would recommend is as soon as you get your ballot, vote it and send it back in. Either use the drop box or send it by mail. And just be aware that if you do not receive anything in the mail from me by, let's say, the 10th of October, get on the phone and give me a call.
Steve, being that there's going to be such increased volume this year, what measures is your office taking in terms of hiring additional staff or whatever else? What other actions are you taking to help deal with that huge amount of the volume?
We have extra staff that we've brought in here, and thankfully the executive order moved forward some deadlines that we would normally have to wait much longer before we could print the ballots. So we now have some room in the schedule that we can get the ballots printed and get everything done here in the office. And ultimately, it just comes down to planning on the part of our office staff to get everything done.
So we have another question from Linda. I think we covered this to some extent already, but the question is, how do we know when a ballot is received and counted?
Yeah, so there is an online portal that the state has that feeds into the statewide voter registration system. And that will allow you to see when your ballot has been received by the Board of Elections.
And is that a website, for example, that we could post on our Facebook page?
Yes, yeah, I'll get you all the contact for that.
Perfect.
In terms of when the ballot's been counted, that doesn't show up on there because we're going to be counting, for quite a while after Election Day.
So we have another question from Fred Douglas. Even if the mail is reliable, could a nefarious party spoil a ballot by sending signed ballots claiming to be from people and having your office get 2 ballots, one fraudulent and one valid, or intercepting a good ballot so the voter thinks it was received?
So in terms of getting in 2 ballots, a fraudulent party is not going to have access to all the information that we're going to have on the certificates. So it's extremely unlikely that you could have 2 seemingly legitimate ballots come in. So that's the likelihood of that happening is approaching null.
Is there ever a situation where you guys receive a mail-in ballot and it's flagged for one reason or another, where you would actually reach out to the individual to ask them whether or not this was in fact their ballot? If, for example, signatures don't match or something else seemed off.
Signatures and the lack of signatures are those will trigger something called a ballot cure, where the board reaches out to the voter and gets additional verification of the identity of the voter.
How do they reach out?
They send it by certified mail. If they've got some of the more recent registrations have email and phone contact. But where that shows up more often nowadays is because most of the registrations come through motor vehicle. And if you recall, the last time you went in to renew your driver's license, you signed on that electronic pad. You didn't sign using a pen on paper. And so those signatures tend to look a little bit different. But that can be rectified after the ballot is received.
We have a question from Anna Duarte McCarthy, who asks, does the county inform a voter that their VBM has been disqualified, i.e. filled out incorrectly, and can they resubmit a vote? I think we just talked about that.
Yeah, so in terms of the lack of signature, yes, they can correct that ballot. If the ballot was rejected for another reason, let's say they tore off the certificate flap and never turned it back in, that ballot is spoiled, and that cannot be counted. The board will notify those people that their ballot was not counted and the reason why it was rejected.
Is there any recourse that a voter might have if they were told?
No, because that would be well after the election. Yeah, only the signature do they have a recourse.
We have another question from Douglas Smith. How long will it take to report the results, especially this year with the volume? What are you anticipating?
Yeah, it took about 3.5 weeks for the primary, for the board to get everything counted. I'm hoping that that piece of legislation that I talked about that would allow the board to stage the ballots and get them ready for counting right after midnight on election day will speed things, and that we can get them counted more rapidly. But we do have an absolute hard deadline for certification on the 23rd of November because the Electoral College has to meet, and that occurs on December 14th. And that is by federal statute and cannot be changed.
We have a question from Jen Kluger, who asks, will the Board of Election in Somerville be open for people to bring in their ballots?
It's highly unlikely that it's going to be open. The building is still closed to the public, but that's why we have the drop box directly in front of our door.
Well, Steve, you've answered so many questions tonight. We can't thank you enough for being here with us and for all your hard work. And I think you should start maybe sleeping now.
For sure. Yeah, rest up while you can.
I don't have to worry about watching the Mets tonight since the game got canceled because of COVID. So.
But then you'd have to watch the Mets anyway.
Well, yeah. See, I grew up in Illinois, so I'm a Cardinals fan.
Okay.
Confession here.
Fair enough. Well, thanks very much, Steve. This has been really great. I think that our viewers really have enjoyed it and are coming away a lot more informed and hopefully a lot more comfortable about vote by mail maybe than they were when they tuned in.
Yeah, and if they've got any other questions,
thank you so much, Steve.
We had the email out, so let me know.
And your information is at the bottom there for all our viewers. If you need to contact Steve, his number and email are at the bottom of the screen. Thanks, you, everyone, for joining us. We have, if you're around on August 31st, I believe it is, John, we have
I think it's August 30th next Sunday.
August 30th, we have a meet and greet. We'd love to meet you. Do we know any details about that?
It's from 9 to 10:30 a.m. I think we're still working out the location, but that will certainly be posted on our website and on our social media. And we'd love for you guys to come out and have a cup of coffee on us.
We'd love to meet you. And thanks so much for joining us tonight. And thank you to our special guest, County Clerk Steve Peter. Good night, everyone.
Good night, Kevin.